have the community photo exhibit at the North Carolina Botanical Garden, and this is a sneak peek. A lot of the flowers, the photos of the flowers that you see have been submitted by the community, really, and it's going to be live on our website on November 1st. So you're getting kind of a sneak peek of some of the photos that have made it to the exhibit. So yeah, thanks everyone for participating in the community exhibit. Hopefully we have some of those photographers on this on the meeting.
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
So honored
pictures.
to get a sneak peek. They're lovely pictures. Thank you for the sneak peek, Jenna.
Some of them are so wild. I don't know if y'all have a favorite that you've seen, but if you have a favorite wildflower, we would love to hear from you in the chat and type that in. Favorite North Carolina wildflower.
And I want to remind folks, if you respond to where you live, if you could respond to all panelists and all participants also. Some of you are just responding to us. So I don't know, this technology is a little much for me.
It looks like we're getting some favorite flowers, lady slippers. I saw some orchids, but now they're coming in quick. Passion by
Elephant's foot. What is elephant's foot? I don't know what that is.
Trout lily.
When you respond, you can pick who it goes to. If you just click on that box, it says either all panelists or all panelists and attendees. They'll come up. Oh, lots of people are signing in. Oh my gosh, we have 187 people here.
We're close to 200. That's awesome.
Wow, that's great, y'all. Oh, that one, Black-Eyed Susan. You know what I love about that picture is that I look at that and that looks nothing like Black-Eyed Susan in my yard because you see the whole thing, right? So the close-up is a really great, such a great angle on it. Oh, from the Midwest. Oh, cool, yay.
And to the folks just tuning in, we'll get started in just a few minutes here with the program. We're letting folks come in so we can make sure we've got everyone on the call. And in the meantime, make sure to check out that link on Native Lands and put in your zip code to see what Native people lived on the land that you live on. And also we're typing in favorite wildflowers as well.
So I want to encourage folks, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end. And if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you can see there's a Q&A section and then there's a chat section. So I encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A part and not in the chat because they'll go by too fast and we'll miss them. You can make sure you put them in the Q&A part and then the chat. I noticed I just saw a question pop up that it came and went. So encourage you to put them in there. So great. This is awesome. Yellow passion flowers, nice. Ephemeral, yeah, that's nice. Great. Well, people are still getting on, so we're gonna wait a few more minutes. If you're having technical difficulties, I don't know if you can hear me if you're having technical difficulties. But if you are, you might want to refresh your link or log out and reconnect to Zoom. But we'll also be recording, so you can check it out later online if you need to. Oh, folks coming from the mountains? Cool.
That's lovely. I wish we had some way of having people post pictures in the chat so that we could see all the pictures of these flowers.
I know some of them. I haven't heard too.
We got to ask Zoom to do that upgrade.
Yeah. I noticed that somebody gave a shout out to Casey, and Casey is not visible here and you probably won't see her, but she's kind of the brains behind this endeavor. So if there are any problems, she's not the one to blame. If there are, I'm sure I will do something wrong. So she gave really good directions that I don't always follow very well. So.
Great, and I see a first question pop in the question answer. box. So if you have questions about wildflowers, feel free to drop them now, as well as continuously while the panelists are speaking today, and we'll pick them up and have plenty of time at the end for answering your questions.
Yeah. I do love a trout lily, partly because I can identify them, and most plants I can't identify very well when I'm hiking, so they're beautiful. Striped wintergreen, cool.
I don't know about anyone else, but it seems like when I think about my favorite wildflower, it changes depending on the time of the year and
whatever's blooming.
Yeah. And I'm already starting to think about the early spring ephemerals and what I'm looking forward to. So
that's great. Cool. All right. All right, we're getting ready to start, I think. So I'm Sandy Schweitzer, and I'm the Executive Director of Triangle Land Conservancy. I am thrilled to see you all here. Wildflowers might seem like the least wild part of this year, at least to me, but 2020 is the North Carolina Botanical Gardens Year of the Wildflower. So we're thrilled you're joining us virtually tonight. We have been talking about doing this with them since January, and as with so many other things, COVID changed it all. So I'm really excited that we have so much good participation today. I look forward to learning with you how to build botanical capacity, and in doing so, help care for and protect the natural habitats where native wildflowers, trees, and animals thrive. Triangle Land Conservancy was founded in 1983 by a group of dedicated citizens who were concerned about balancing growth and conservation of open space in the Triangle region. Together with thousands of members, we've protected over 20,000 acres of land and 141 miles of stream across Chatham, Durham, Johnston, Lee, Orange, and Wake counties. TLC strives to create a healthier and more vibrant Triangle region by safeguarding clean water, protecting natural habitats, supporting local farms and food, and connecting people with nature. We do this through land protection and stewardship, catalyzing community action and collaboration. And I want to note on the collaboration front, usually at Wild Ideas, we have lots of our partner organizations in the room, and I am really missing that tonight. We couldn't do what we do if it wasn't for the botanical gardens and lots of other folks who are working in this space too. Our work is also possible because of the support of members like many of you and our program sponsors, the Great Outdoor Provision Company, Blue Heron, Bank of America, Leap and Limb, Murphy's Naturals, and Centrex. I'd also like to give a special shout out at this moment to my staff. They are awesome, and many of them have been working to make sure tonight goes really smoothly for a while, and I'm super grateful to them for that. I'm also really pleased to introduce tonight's host and MC, Anupama Joshi. She is a member of TLC's board of directors, and in her real life, in her work job, her day job, as I like to think of it, she is executive director of Blue Sky Funders Forum, where she facilitates connections, communications, and collaboration among funders supporting environmental literacy and efforts connecting people with nature. Before that, she co-founded and led the National Farm to School Network for more than a decade, building a movement to incorporate local food procurement, gardens, and food and farm education in schools and early care sites across the United States. In addition to TLC's board, Anupama currently serves on the board of directors for the Farmers Market Coalition and provides mentorship to emerging leaders through the Community Food Systems Mentorship Program. She's also a mom, loves to travel and cook, and lives in Cary. So glad you could do this for us tonight, Anupama.
Thank you so much, Sandy, and welcome everybody. It's my pleasure to host this evening's Wild Ideas program. I'm delighted to see so many people joining us, and the numbers are ticking up from across our region. I believe we're close to about 220 people that have joined us, and more are coming in as the session's going along. TLC's Wild Ideas series provides a dynamic, interactive venue for experts and community members to educate the public and share innovative ideas for addressing the 4 public benefits of conservation that drive TLC's work. First, connecting people with nature. Second, safeguarding clean water. Third, protecting natural habitats. And fourth, supporting local farms and food. We are happy to be hosting this program with support from the North Carolina Botanical Garden. And I'm pleased to introduce Jana Starr, who will share a few welcome remarks on behalf of the garden. Jana?
Thank you, Anupama. So I'm Jana Starr, the Facilities and Events Manager and Sustainability Officer at the North Carolina Botanical Garden. Thanks so much for joining us today for this very special event. I wish we could be celebrating in person, but in the meantime, this will do. I wanted to share a little bit more about the garden before we get started with the presentations. The North Carolina Botanical Garden, or NCBG, is a conservation garden, meaning we're focused on the conservation and protection of plants that are native to the Southeast. The garden is a part of UNC Chapel Hill. We work towards the mission of conservation through our display gardens, and we cultivate more than 1,100 acres of conservation areas as well. In addition, we do research on rare plants, we collect seeds through our seed bank, and we have the largest herbarium collection in the Southeast. We're deeply committed to sustainability at the garden, which can be seen through our LEED Platinum facilities, our waste-free events, and our native plant landscapes. The garden is open to the public for free Tuesday through Sunday. And if you want to visit the garden or check out any of our nature preserves, or if you want to learn more about our mission and our public programs, then check us out at ncbg.unc.edu. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jana, for being here with us today and for your support. Tonight at Wild Ideas for Wildflowers, we will hear from Alan Weakley, who's the director of the UNC Herbarium and co-author of Wildflowers of the Atlantic Southeast. We'll hear from Basil Camu, Chief Vision Officer at Leaf and Limb, Matt Rutledge, TLC's Associate Director of Stewardship, and Elena Peterman, TLC AmeriCorps member. Our panelists will share with us their passion for wildflowers, native trees, and shrubs. They'll also share tips and tools to ease identification of native species and ways to protect beneficial biodiversity, as well as how to heal and care for our planet. Like many of you, TLC staff and the speakers today are logging in remotely, so please bear with us as the internet might be slower than normal and there might be a little bit of a lag. To help us ensure a better experience for you at today's session, we've actually pre-recorded the presentations that you're about to hear, but all of our wonderful speakers and panelists are here live with us as well, and look forward to joining you in a Q&A session at the end. So you'll have a chance to ask them questions live. Please take a moment to locate the Q&A button at the bottom of your panel or bottom of your screen, and all your questions should be submitted through this Q&A feature, and we'll do our best to include them in the live Q&A session at the end of the program today. You're also able to adjust the volume of the presentation through your own computer controls, so feel free to do that. And we're happy to share information about the work that TLC and our partners are doing to make the Triangle healthier and more vibrant. So let's turn to my fellow TLC board member, Jenny Bo, to get things started. Jenny, take it away.
Thank you so much, Anupama. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Bo, one of Triangle Land Conservancy's board members, and I have the pleasure of introducing Alan Weakley today. Alan is a plant systematist, plant community ecologist, biogeographer, and conservation biologist focused on the species and systems of the southeastern United States. He has been the director of the UNC Herbarium, a department of the North Carolina Botanical Garden since 2002, and he is the co-author of Wildflowers of the Atlantic Southeast, a comprehensive wildflower guide with descriptions and photos of more than 1,200 species, as well as additional plant identification tools that he'll share with us today. He has a PhD from Duke University and a BA from UNC Chapel Hill. Alan has also worked as a botanist and ecologist for the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program, the Nature Conservancy, and NatureServe. Alan, thank you again for joining us for Wild Ideas. I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jenny. It's great to be with you all this evening and talk about plants and identifying them and learning to see. So the plant on the screen right now is a very rare plant. It occurs only in 2 places in the world. One a little bit north of Durham in North Carolina, and the second location just over the Virginia line in South Central Virginia. It's a newly described species that I and a grad student described a few years ago. the oak barren Barbara's buttons, Marshallia legrandii. And it's an example of some of the plants that we can see right here in the triangle. For most of us, though, as we go about our daily activities, as we drive to the store, drive to work, take a run on a greenway, we tend to be confronted with what I'll call the green wall. There's vegetation out there. There's this sort of massive green, and it all sort of looks indistinguishable, and all we sort of see is greenness. And what I want us to encourage us to do is to look more closely and start distinguishing the individual plants in that landscape, in that green landscape. So down in the coastal plain here near Wilmington, North Carolina, the longleaf pine ecosystem can look pretty monotonous when you first set foot in it. All the trees are longleaf pines, and beneath it there's this kind of grassy sward that looks almost like a mowed lawn. And it looks kind of boring. But if you look a little more closely, it turns out to be anything but boring. And the white flowers here give us a little foreshadowing of that and suggest that there might be more going on than meets our eye immediately. So the white flowers are the Carolina grass of Parnassus, Parnassia caroliniana, another quite rare species in our region. When we do look closely at those longleaf pine savannas, we find that they have almost record-setting richness of species, 52 flowering plant species in a single square meter. And that includes carnivorous plants like Venus flytrap and purple pitcher plants and others. So orchid species, really remarkable. So, but if you just walk through it and don't look down and don't look carefully, you might miss all those plants. Another reason to look closely at plants is to recognize how important they are for us. They really are fundamental in our lives, but we tend to take them for granted. They provide us with most of the fabric of clothes that we wear. They provide us nearly all of our food. Even if we eat animal products, that comes from fodder of plants. They provide us bouquets and gardens and so forth, the coffee we drink, the trumpet-like flower that I'm playing there as a little boy. They also provide us most of our medicines, whether herbal medicines or commercial pharmaceuticals. Most of our commercial pharmaceuticals come from chemicals that were originally located in plants and that we now synthesize into our medicines. And they even provide us the oxygen we breathe. Plants are really a fundamental part of our lives, providing us ecosystem services. So what I want to do is encourage us to get out of doors and look around us and learn to see the real world. And in the triangle here, there are wonderful places to do that. Even the most ordinary place, if you look closely, turns out to be extraordinary. So in the area immediately around us, we have state parks, we've got county parks and greenways and open space. We've got Triangle Land Conservancy preserves, the Duke Forest, the North Carolina Botanical Garden, the garden proper, the maintained part of the garden, but also natural areas such as the Mason Farm Ecological Reserve, Jordan Lake Game Lands managed by the Wildlife Resources Commission, and even roadside rights-of-way harbor a surprising amount of biodiversity under power lines and along roadsides. If we find a safe way to pull off and just walk along the road, we can see a lot of even rare plants that will surprise you how much there is. So at the North Carolina Botanical Garden, we've developed a number of tools to help us see plants. And one of those is this Wildflower Guide, Wildflowers of the Atlantic Southeast. It was written by two of my colleagues and myself at the garden, Laura Cotterman, Damon Waite, and myself. And it provides a guide that doesn't require a lot of extensive botanical training, but has kind of a systematic way of figuring out what a plant is. It covers an 8-state region, the District of Columbia and southeastern Pennsylvania, a total area about the size of Texas, that it also includes about 1/5 of the US population. So a lot of plants in that area. And we made a selection of 1,200 out of the about 6,000 plant species that occur in that area. We also have sections of the book that encourage you to read the landscape, to understand the factors that determine what plant grows where, the soil types, the temperature, the climate, you all know from driving around that you don't see the same plants on the top of Mount Mitchell as you see on the Outer Banks. So why is that? We provide information that helps you understand why the diversity of plants is what it is. So there's a chapter on how to use the book that gives you guidance on how to assess these sort of few features that we use to provide a kind of simple key, and gives you guidance on the process to follow to identify your plants. Those features that we ask you to observe are the color of the flowers, the symmetry of the flower. Is it radial like a daisy, or is it bilateral like an orchid? The number of petals, and then some simple features of the leaves. Are they simple or divided? Are they arranged on the stem, alternate, opposite, or whorled, or are there no leaves at all? And the leaf margin, is it entire or toothed or lobed? And so by judging just these few features, basically you can get down to a relatively limited set of choices. Some wildflower guides basically just arrange the guide by flower color. And in the section on yellow flowers, you have 139 pages to flip through with 3 plants per page. And that's not a very practical way to get to a good answer. So we provide this kind of systematic approach of limiting your choices. Once you've done that, you get to a particular section of the book. It points you to a page color, page number, and you look at that and have a limited number of choices to go through. There's, in addition to the pictures, there's additional information about flowering time and range within the area, and kind of the habitat, the height of the plant, things like that, that will help you make a choice about the plant that you have in your hand. Okay, so I want to introduce a couple of other tools, and this is an app that you can put on your phone. It's the Flora of Virginia app. We're actually working on designing one that will cover North Carolina as well, but the Flora of Virginia app can work quite well in North Carolina, particularly in our area where we're pretty close to the border of Virginia. And it offers a particular thing, the graphic key, as well as more technical dichotomous keys. Has lots of illustrations. It's a pretty expensive app at $19.99, but well worth the price if you're interested in learning to identify plants. You can also browse around in it and look at pictures by family or by genus. There's the Botanical help section, which gives you terminology and so forth. The reference library leads you to additional information. So lots of resources packed full in this app. But I want to introduce particularly the graphic key, which is, I think, a really nifty and cool tool. So On the left page here, you can see up near the top, it says graphic key, and it says right below that 3,164 found. So that's the 3,164 plants that occur in Virginia. That's a lot to sort through. But by making simple choices, we reduce that number really quickly. So the first choice to make is what plant group? Is it a fern? Is it a flowering plant? Is it a shrub or tree? And once you've made that choice, on the right, you can see that choosing a broad-leaved woody plant reduces the number of plants down to 474. So we're already well on our way to getting to a manageable number of plants. We can then choose additional things about the habitat, about the season of flowering, whether it has spines, etc. And each time we make that choice, the app filters through the 3,164 plants and reduces the number of possibilities further. So ultimately, we get down to a limited number that we need to assess. So this shows we've chosen a broad-leaved woody plant with opposite leaves. The leaves are simple. The vein pattern is palmate. The leaves are lobed and they're toothed. And after we've made those really quite simple choices, we're down from 3,164 to 10. And the 10 include 4 maples and 6 viburnums. And so we can sort through those and judge what the right choice is. Once we've made a tentative choice, like black maple, Acer nigrum, there's additional information about when it flowers, what it looks like, what habitat to expect it in, and so forth, that help us confirm the choice. And there is also on the bottom left, the search characteristics, kind of a trail of breadcrumbs that tells us what choices we made. A range map on the right that shows us the counties in Virginia in which the plant occurs. Okay, and then the third and last kind of tool that I want to introduce is iNaturalist. And iNaturalist is a program that was developed about 10 years ago. It is a phone app and also downloadable on your PC or Mac at home. And there's the web page to do that. It's free. And it's a citizen science tool. It's a way to make observations that are also useful for scientists and conservationists, as well as being kind of, I don't know, Facebook for science geeks. Once you join iNaturalist, you'll find yourself part of a community of naturalists who help ID your observations. So you can make observations really simply using your phone, taking a photograph or a series of photographs of something that you see, and then directly uploading those geotagged observations from your phone. Once it's been uploaded, you'll get help from others in identifying the plants or animals. And a kind of amazing thing is that it also has an artificial intelligence or machine learning ID tool built in. And so essentially it will make a guess, an intelligent guess, as to what you've seen. The 30 million observations that others have made before you basically are all in a gigantic database. And it compares your photograph against those other photographs and also takes into account where you are, that you're in North Carolina rather than Australia, for instance. And the app will essentially make a suggestion. It'll say, we think you're looking at red maple. Or it may say, there's not enough information for us to tell, but here are 10 possibilities and all. So you can take the suggestion, or you can look through the 10 possibilities and make a choice. Similarly to the other two tools that I described, and upload that observation. And then others will look at it and agree or disagree. So you might get a little debate going about whether it is indeed red maple or something else. When when iNaturalist first introduced this artificial intelligence tool, I was really skeptical that it was going to work well for plants. I thought it might work well for robins and blue jays and mockingbirds, but surely it wasn't going to work well for buttercups and asters and so forth. But it's actually pretty amazingly good. It's a really cool tool to use and a really fun community to become a part of, joining iNaturalist. And all three of these tools, I think, will help lead you to observe more carefully. And that ability to observe plants, to see them for what they are, sometimes is referred to as teaching or curing plant blindness, teaching us to see plants, or improving our plant attention deficiency, or building our botanical capacity. And I think all these are really important concepts going forward with conservation in our area and all around the world. And I've always loved this quote by Baba Dioum, who was a Senegalese forester back in the 1960s. And I'll leave us with this thought. In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Alan. These tools will be really handy to have on my next hike to learn more about our native plants. For everyone joining today, I would love to hear what native plants you all love, or maybe you have seen on your favorite trails lately. Please feel free to share that with us by typing their names in the chat box now. Alan, thank you again. Now I'm going to throw it over to Margaret, who will introduce our next speaker.
I'm Margaret Sands, the Land Protection Manager at TLC, and I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, Basil Camu. Basil loves trees, and he only has 8.5 minutes to tell us why. He also loves soil, wildflowers, insects, bats, fungi, ecosystems, basically Earth, and he's very committed to taking care of this beautiful planet. So he's a tree ecologist, a board-certified master arborist, and co-owner of Leaf and Limb. And on the weekends, he's also a gardening, planting, ecosystem restoration addict. One of Basil's favorite pastimes is hanging out with his wife and sons at arboretums, gardens, forests, and of course, TLC Nature Preserves. He also enjoys staying physically active with jujitsu, powerlifting, CrossFit, hiking, and long-distance running. Whew. After family, plants, and physical exertion, Basil's next favorite things in life are reading, garlic, traveling the world, blazing hot peppers, pickles, and anything from Lucette Grace in downtown Raleigh, in that order. And now Basil's going to tell us a little bit about Project Pando and Leaf and Limb. Go ahead and take it away, Basil.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor. My name is Basil Camu. I work with Leaf and Limb. We care for trees because we love our planet. And we, of course, offer all the services you'd expect from a tree care company, like planting and preservation and pruning, these sorts of things. But we're purpose-driven, which means we also take time to educate folks about the importance of trees, spread awareness, and that is why I'm here today. I love this planet, and I think most of you can agree this is just an amazing place. Unfortunately, a lot's changing quickly. We have big issues that are facing us today, and I want to talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to get into Project Pando and how I hope that Pando can help solve some of these issues. So one of the big things is trees, topsoil, water, these things are disappearing. We cut down about a football field worth of trees every 2 seconds. We've lost half of our topsoil in the last 150 years, and half of the aquifers on planet Earth are drying too fast to be replenished. Not only that, but we're losing a lot of biodiversity. World Wildlife Foundation estimates that we've lost about 60% of all animals, birds, and insects in the last 40 years. 40 years is the blink of an eye in terms of ecosystems timescale. Not only that, but carbon is being released from a stable state. So left to its own, nature typically holds carbon within trees, within soil, within oceans, these sorts of things. It's in a stable state. But when we deforest, when we burn, when we do agriculture with chemical inputs, these things all move carbon from its stable state into this oxidized state in the atmosphere. And this is happening very rapidly, faster than ecosystems can adapt. So what to do? Well, there's a lot that we need to do. But one of the things I would suggest is to think trees. Trees are one of nature's original tools used to create this planet that we know and love today. Trees can be a really important part of how we go about healing this planet and caring for this planet. But to do that, to plant billions of trees and reforest the planet, we're going to hit some other issues. New trees are expensive. If you've been to the nursery, you know new trees cost $50 all the way up to $300. They're not cheap. If you want to reforest an area, then you've either got to pay a lot of money for these trees, or you've got to use saplings, which have their own challenges and often don't survive. So we've got to overcome this bit about trees being expensive. Not only that, but the wrong species are being grown and sold. Most nurseries in this area and all over the US, quite frankly, are selling species from Asia. And those might look beautiful, but when you plant them here, our local wildlife, our insects, they can't feed on those trees. They did not co-evolve with those trees, so they're not able to digest the leaves or the berries. And then the way that trees are being grown is destroying genetic diversity. It's cloning, propagation, these techniques, you end up getting a genetically identical tree. So for example, here in the Raleigh area, if you go into a new community and you see red maples on the streets, those are all probably genetically identical to each other, and not only to each other, but to every other community in this area. So we have to think about genetic diversity. Enter Project Pando. This is a nonprofit initiative from Leaf and Limb. We hope that this can help solve some of those issues that we've just discussed. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project and what we hope that this project can achieve. So first, what is Project Pando? It's a volunteer-driven tree farm that grows native trees to give to the public for free. We want to harvest all those billions of acorns and seeds that drop every single season, and we want to grow them using volunteer help and using regenerative practices like composting leaves and wood chips and all these things, and raise these trees up, these native trees, and then give them away to the public for free. Right now, we're doing this at the Williamson Preserve. Triangle Land Conservancy has graciously allowed us to use the Chickasaw plum field. And we began this earlier this year. We actually started the project a year ago, but then TLC gave us this land several months ago, and we have begun work. I should clarify, they didn't give us the land, they let us use the land. And who is joining us for this work? So right now it's Leaf and Limb employees. It's folks who know about Leaf and Limb, maybe they're clients or they see what we do. It's folks from the general public. It's anybody who has an interest in caring for the planet, growing trees. These are the folks who are already helping with this project. Next, I want to tell you a little bit about what we hope to solve, some of the solutions we hope to produce. So first, collecting seeds from public lands, from forests, from old trees, we hope to bring genetic diversity back into the landscape. Remember, y'all, diversity is the key to nature. This is like one of the crux things with nature. You've got to have diversity. So we hope to bring that back. We also hope that we can reintroduce native trees in force. So we would like to turn communities from these food deserts for birds and for insects into food havens, so that migratory birds passing over can stop and feed freely, and we can begin feeding the things that live here naturally, and thus bolstering and helping our ecosystems recover. And then really we want to open up the pipeline to free trees. We think trees should be free. I mean, after all, seeds are growing everywhere, saplings are sprouting up everywhere. Why can't trees be free? With just a little bit of work and a little bit of know-how and a little bit of knowledge, we can take this free resource, make it available for everybody, and just open up this pipeline to free trees. We also hope to create an open source blueprint. We want to give our work away to the world for free. We hope that other communities and other cities and other states all over the US will take the work that we're doing, the videos, the how-tos, the guides, take exactly what we've done and make it their own, get their own volunteer task force, build on our work, and then we can create thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of Project Pando hubs all over the country. Because ultimately, this is what we're after. We've got to help heal the planet. We've got to care for the planet we have. If we're going to put trillions of trees in the ground, if we're going to reforest this planet, we need readily available native species. And I do believe we can do this. I believe this is good for the planet, and I hope that all of you are interested in potentially joining this project. And sorry, y'all, I jumped my slide a little bit there. This is the part where I tell you my recommendation for what you can do to get involved. So care for trees, plant trees, particularly native trees. I'd recommend that. If you're interested in getting involved with Project Pando, we'd really love to have you. And on this final slide, which we'll transition to right now, there's going to be some links. It's leaflim.com/pando. My email is here. You can reach out to me. We'd love to have you get involved. But even if you don't join Project Pando, please plant trees, care for the ones you have. These things will help heal the planet. Thanks so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Basil. That was a real treat. We really appreciate you joining us today. And while we're thinking trees, could everybody go ahead and throw in the chat box what their favorite North Carolina native tree is? And also, if you have any questions for Basil to answer in the Q&A, there's also a Q&A box. So please put your questions in there. And next, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ryan Williams, who's going to introduce our last speakers for tonight.
Thanks, Margaret and Basil. That was such a great presentation. I really learned a lot, and I hope you learned a lot about the Pando project at TLC's Williamson Preserve. I'm Ryan Williams. I'm TLC's business manager, and I'm excited to introduce to you my colleagues, Matt Rutledge and Elena Peterman. Matt joined TLC in 2013 and currently serves as the Associate Director of Stewardship. Prior to TLC, he earned a master's degree in environmental management and a forestry management from Duke University, and a bachelor's degree in history from the College of William and Mary. Matt believes strongly in local conservation and especially enjoys TLC's work in habitat restoration. He lives in Chapel Hill and enjoys hiking, exploring the outdoors, and spending time with family. Elena is one of TLC's 2 AmeriCorps members. Her efforts are focused on community engagement at the Bailey and Sarah Williamson Preserve in Eastern Wake County. Prior to joining TLC, Elena did research on climate policy, studied community forestry in southern Mexico, and organized around environmental justice in Chicago. She holds a bachelor's degree in sociocultural anthropology from the University of Chicago. Matt and Elena, take it away.
Thanks, Ryan, for that introduction. I'm Matt Rutledge, and I'm going to talk a little bit about maintaining the buzz and how TLC is restoring some habitats, particularly for pollinators. And we have several projects across the region that I'm going to touch on. So here are just a few headlines that I pulled from the last few years, talking about pollinator decline and some of the threats to pollinators. One of them is ecological Armageddon, where in Germany they noted a 75% decline in flying insects over a 20 or 25-year period. So these are very serious threats to pollinators, and TLC is working at several of our preserves. Here's our area map, and our Horton Grove Preserve in the top center. We have a restoration project there that I'll talk about. As well as our recently opened Williamson Preserve in Eastern Wake and Johnston counties. And we'll talk about a couple of projects out there as well. So first of all, at our Horton Grove Preserve, this was a 20-acre cattle pasture when we acquired the property. and we have worked to restore it to a native grassland, early successional habitat. So we cleared it of scrub and then waited to see what would come back, and then we supplemented that with some additional species as well. We maintain the prairie through prescribed burns. That's one of our major management tools. It gets rid of woody plants and sprouts of trees, as well as some invasive species. There are some species that we have to target with some spraying, and we do very targeted applications to try to eliminate some of those invasives as well. Here are a few of the species you might see out there. In the top left is bee balm with some eastern tiger swallowtail butterflies on it. That's one of the species that we've planted out there as a supplement. The two others on the right is solidago. It's a nice native that came back from the seed bank, as well as milkweed on the bottom left. And one of my favorite things about that site out at Horton Grove is it's different in every season. And so in the late fall, it might look something like this. And if you'd like to see it, we're going to be hosting a hike in the near future. So please sign up for that. It's a beautiful place. I just wanted to thank a few of the folks that made this possible. First of all, our TLC members. Your support makes some of these projects possible. We also received grants from the Fish and Wildlife Service and Burt's Bees, as well as several grants from Merck. We also have a partnership with Audubon, North Carolina, especially around bird habitat, but it also helps us do some projects in the restoration site. Shifting gears a little bit to our Williamson Preserve, it is now open, so I would encourage everyone to check that out. Our trail map is on the bottom left, but check out our website. And Williamson has agricultural, natural, and recreational elements that we're all bringing together. And part of our comprehensive plan, you can see up on the top there. But we have trails, we have restoration projects, and we have active agriculture. One of our restoration projects is longleaf pine restoration. And longleaf pine is one of the most biologically diverse ecosystems on the planet. The main reason for that is the very diverse understory, which in a savanna has lots of flowering plants and grasses for pollinators. And TLC is working with the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP. They have they essentially lease farmland out of active production for wildlife, and they have a longleaf program. And on the bottom there, you can see a snapshot of our management plan, which has prescribed burns, invasive removal, and tree planting and understory establishment. We also worked with Appalachian Mountain Brewing, who has a longleaf IPA. And for every case they sell, they will plant a longleaf tree, and as well as the Longleaf Alliance. And we worked with them on several large volunteer work days where volunteers came out and planted thousands of longleaf seedlings, as you can see there. Longleaf seedlings are in the grass stage, so they look a lot like little tufts of grass. We also have another project out at Williamson. It's part of the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, which I wanted to mention because it is open to anyone who has farm or forest land. It's a cost share program, and in some cases, they will cost share up to 90% of installation costs. We are using it for pollinator habitat restoration, and here are just a few of the species that we'll be working with. We are planting over 70 species in a 7-acre parcel out at Williamson, and it will be primarily focused on pollinators with flowering plants, native grasses, and some flowering shrubs as well. With that, I just wanted to say thank you, and here's a picture of our Williamson Preserve. I would encourage everyone to get out and check it out. It's a beautiful place, and with that, I will turn it over to Elena.
Thanks so much, Matt. As Matt and others have explained, pollinators both healthy ecosystems and agricultural production. But there are some things that we can do on a small scale level to support these vulnerable species. So in the triangle, increasing urbanization and the fragmentation of green space puts pressure on pollinator habitats. One step that individuals can take is to plant pollinator-friendly gardens, providing food and shelter for pollinator species. It's not just parks and preserves that do this work. Homeowners and renters also have a vital role to play. Out at the Sarah and Bailey Williamson Preserve in Eastern Wake County, we have a small pollinator garden established in front of the historic White Barn. And it hosts a bustling crowd of butterflies and bees on a daily basis. It contains 19 species of native pollinator-friendly plants and is a haven for vulnerable pollinator species in this part of the triangle. This is what it looked like in late summer. So when the White Barn was established in 2019, the TLC staff really wanted to create a vibrant space for pollinators to thrive. Thanks to generous donations from the Burt's Bees Foundation, we were able to hire Lily Garden and Design to complete the design and installation of our pollinator garden. Chris Moorman in particular was instrumental in this effort. Here's some action shots of the site preparations. So on the left, you can see the Lily Garden and Design team clearing out sod and grasses to make way for the permeable patio and the pollinator garden area. And as you can see, in comparison to the current photo, they've made huge strides in just a couple months. And in balancing out the need for usable recreational space and also pollinator garden habitat or pollinator habitat, Lily Garden and Design put in over 6 inches of washed gravel underneath the patio and drainage lines to create a permeable gathering space. They then brought in compost, mulch, and plant material to fill in around the sides. So this is an early image of the installed garden. And just a few months later, the garden is blooming and thriving. On the right, you can see the Augustaceae rosy posy flower. That's one of our native flowering plant species. On the left, you can see a really happy carpenter bee foraging. And I'll just make a note that native plants are best supported in promoting native pollinator species. So all the plants in the Williamson Garden are natives, and I will later provide some information on where to source these beautiful flowers. Here are some more species that you can see in the garden: the Helenia mariachi salsa, the Asterwoods purple, and the Gara siskiyou pink. And as you can see, this is both really great habitat for pollinators and also just a really gorgeous garden site for folks to enjoy. And here's some more of our lovely pollinator visitors, including the silver-spotted skipper and the common buckeye. And so as I mentioned before, as developments continue to sprout up across Eastern Wake County and the Triangle at large, small gardens like the one at the Williamson Preserve become all the more essential in supporting pollinators and can make a big cumulative impact in terms of linking habitats and supporting these vulnerable species. And the great news is you don't need hundreds of acres to protect pollinators. Folks can plant pollinator-friendly species and flowers in their front yards, on balconies, along sidewalks. So you can really support pollinators across rural and urban areas and at really small scales. And our wonderful volunteer, Michaela Wren, who works at Wake County Soil and Water, has given us some steps to get started, including identifying plants and natural features you already have, prioritizing your needs and desires for your outdoor space, learning about native plants and deciding what you want to put in, and then connecting with ample local resources to plan and implement your garden. And we are lucky enough to live in an area with some really wonderful local nurseries that provide native pollinator-friendly plant species. The Williamson Preserve Pollinator Garden was supplied by PlantWorks in Rougemont. Some other great options include Mellow Marsh Farm in Siler City, Pure Nursery in Pittsboro, Growing Wild Nursery in Siler City, and Hoffman Nursery in Rougemont. And there are a ton of really great resources online for folks who want to learn more about pollinator gardening or get some inspiration for how to use their space to support these species. we are lucky enough to live close to an NC State, which has a wealth of sort of information and support for folks wanting to start pollinator gardens. And of course, the NC Cooperative Extension agents are a great resource. I'll mention that the Pollinator Paradise Garden, which is run by Debbie Roos out at Chatham Mills outside of Pittsburgh, is a really great example of an established pollinator garden. And is a great option for folks who might not be able to make the trek out to Williamson if they don't live in Wake County. And Debbie Roos has also done a number of video tours of this garden, which are available online. So a great way to get inspiration and sort of learn from an expert about how to make a really successful pollinator garden. So we have a ton of people to thank for our pollinator garden out at Williamson. Especially Lily Garden and Design and Chris Moorman. They were really wonderful to work with and did a really amazing job installing the plants, sort of figuring out design and making a really beautiful and usable space for us out at the Williamson Preserve. And then also a big thanks to Michaela Wren, our wonderful volunteer, who's also made some really amazing resources that I will make available to folks who are in attendance tonight, both sort of brochures to help you learn about pollinator gardens and then also resources for kids. A huge thanks to Burt's Bees for funding our garden. And of course, thank you so much to all of our wonderful Williamson Preserve donors and volunteers for all of your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matt and Elena, for those great presentations. I'm now going to pass the presentations back to Anupama, who will be the moderator for our question and answer session. As a reminder, the questions can be submitted through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen or through the chat box. Anupama?
Thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you to our panelists. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. So thank you again, Alan, Basil, Matt, and Elena. We have a ton of questions coming in, and we have about a half an hour to go through them. So thanks for joining us today to answer the questions live. I did want to mention for our guests today that the recording for this session will be available by the end of this week, and then a lot of resources and resource links and additional resources will also be posted along with the recording. If we are unable to get through all of your questions today, our panelists will be able to answer them and we'll have them available for you also along with the recording. So we're going to try and address as many as possible today, but there are a lot coming in. So let's get started. The first question that I have is for you, Alan, and maybe Jana as well, actually. This is from Mary, who says that that she is a member of the Missouri Botanical Garden and asks if the North Carolina Botanical Garden has any cooperative projects or understanding with the Missouri Botanical Garden or others that that folks are members of. Alan?
Yeah, I'll take a start at that. Yeah, we work a lot with the Missouri Botanical Garden. It's one of the largest botanical gardens in the country and another conservation garden. I work on the Flora North America project, which has heavy participation out of the Missouri Botanical Garden. And of course, we are all members of the American Garden Association and have reciprocal arrangements for visitation across different gardens around the country.
Great. Jana, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Alan covered it. Thanks.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much. Here's a question for Matt and other panelists. Please jump in as well if you've got a response to these questions, because many of these are applicable to all of you. But I'm gonna toss this to Matt. Lee Allen asks about what some of the best wildflowers may be to plant in her backyard or in her garden for bees and other pollinators.
That's a great question, and I would encourage you to check out some of the resources that some of our volunteers put together. Some of my personal favorites and ones I've planted in my yard, I have some black-eyed Susans. I also have some common milkweed. which I think is a great pollinator plant. We have patches of it at some of our preserves, and if you hit it at the right time when it's in full bloom, it's just a buzz with activity. There are just pollinators everywhere. So those are a couple of my favorites.
Great, thanks. Any other responses to that question?
I really love asters, and they're in full bloom right now. And there are some incredible native asters. I counted like 5 different bee species on my asters a few days ago.
Some of the mints are also wonderful, like mountain mints and bee balm and so forth. Great pollinator plants. Great, really, really a buzz.
Excellent, great. So here's a question for you, Basil. Jennifer asks if anybody has had any success in persuading neighbors or neighborhoods to convert grass and non-natives to native habitats, or or other ways to persuade people to think about these ideas without sort of sounding preachy or igniting a neighborhood issue going out with with the neighbors.
Yeah, it's a complex question, and there's a complex answer. I'll try to break it down into just some really basics, because we have had some success with this. We work with a lot of HOAs and communities on things just like this. I think you kind of have to come at it from an inclusive standpoint, like no wagging the finger, more like I do this because I love this, sort of more an inclusive approach. And I think also it helps to get people involved in doing something. So to the extent that you can get your neighbors like planting a flower or just observing some tree or some basic thing in their yard is a really good entryway for getting folks caring a little more about the ecosystem. And then I think sort of from a money standpoint, there's good financial arguments to be made. Hey, leave the leaves, save yourself the pain of raking and the noise and yada, yada. And by the way, like when you do that, it does all these amazing things for the ecosystem. There are bunches of cool articles you can give them to that effect. Leaf and Limb has a lot on our website, but there's tons online. And then the last piece I'd say, there's some really cool studies out there about like what it takes to move communities towards these. Andy Fox over at NC State has done some awesome research into this. I'm sure he'd love for you to email him and get some of those peer-reviewed pieces, because there's a lot of cool psychology about how you move folks. The very last one, read a book called Breaking Through Gridlock. It's about how to communicate with people across difficult conversations like this one, like how to care for the planet.
Excellent response. Thank you. There's a lot of different ways of approaching people and sort of coming to common ground. Thank you, Basil, for that. So here's a question for Elena. Margaret asks, do you have to irrigate the Williamson garden, because all your pictures look wonderful?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
The question is from Margaret, who asks if you have to irrigate the Williamson garden, the garden at the Williamson Preserve.
I might pass that to Matt. I actually don't know the answer to that.
Okay, Matt, take it away.
I am not sure, actually. I don't believe we have an irrigation system set up. All these are native species, so they're adapted to this area and the climate in this area. However, once they're first put in, it can help to water to help them get established. I don't believe we did any of that. I think because they're native species, we just kind of planted them, and we'll see what happens, and we might have to supplement some of the plantings or change something like that.
I think Leanne Hammerbacker just answered on chat that there is no irrigation, that the selection was of plants that could tolerate drier conditions.
Thanks, Leanne.
Excellent. I love the way how, this is a community of giving questions and responding to them as well. It's wonderful to see that. So Matt, here's another question for you. Kathy asks if there are any invasive species on TLC lands that folks are visiting, how and should they be reporting them if they see them, and how?
That's a great question. There are many invasive species on TLC properties. We do have when we had volunteer work days, some of those would be targeted at removing invasives. Many of them are common invasives, microstegium, Japanese stilt grass is the common name. You probably have some of it in your yard and might not know it. I know I do in mine. I try to get rid of it in my yard, but it can just carpet the understory of a forest. We have privet, we have tree of heaven. We do some targeted removal of those invasive species. We also utilize volunteers. We are aware of most of the patches on our open nature preserves. However, if you see a large patch of something that you're not sure of and it looks like it's taking over, you can always email into TLC. We have a general email account. It's info@triangleland.org, or you can always email me. My information is online as well. We do appreciate that, and it also helps to know that there are folks out there keeping an eye on the land.
Yes, Alan.
I'd like to add something, and that is that iNaturalist, which I mentioned, is a great way to make observations of invasive species. And then that information is available to volunteers and interested folks in working on those. One particularly bad invasive that's just really on the move in the triangle right now is fig buttercup, Ficaria verna. And it's a relatively new invasive in our area. And you know, the thing about the horse and the barn door, that applies to invasive species in a big way. If you can try to control them before they become so pervasive, you can really, you know, stop the infestation from moving kind of exponentially across the landscape. And so some of those sort of new and upcoming invasive species are ones that are particularly important to target. So that's another use for iNaturalist and citizen science observations.
Excellent, thank you. So here's a question that I'm just going to pose, and you know, whoever wants to answer it, I think either one of you, any one of you would be able to answer this. So there's a question from Scott, and he asks, how do we address the deer population that is under great stress in the Triangle area with a sizable population, and then there are some areas where deer are overgrazing forest floors. Obviously, deer are losing natural areas at a rapid rate, as well as putting more stress on the existing forest for food. Who wants to go first? Yes, Matt, go ahead.
Basil, feel free to jump in if you want to go.
Bring back packs of gray wolves.
That's actually my dad's preferred strategy. And one thing we do is mostly on our more remote properties and our larger properties is we do have some hunting leases on some of our properties. For us, it's a way to keep eyes on the land. We have a small staff and spread out over 6 counties. That can be a challenge. It can also reduce browse pressure from deer. I've seen some forest areas where there is very definitely a browse line at about 4 feet, where there is nothing green below 4 feet, and then everything becomes very green above it because the deer have eaten everything. So there can be extreme pressures from grazing. It can also lead to things like automobile strikes, things like that. There are some hunting groups that work with strictly bow hunting. We were contacted by one recently, and then look to provide the meat from the deers that they hunt to local food banks. And with bow hunting, you can hunt on smaller parcels in more densely populated areas. So that's another avenue. We haven't explored that, but we were contacted recently, and so have had informal contact, and we'll be reaching out to them just to get a little bit more information. So those are some of the things that TLC does.
Got it. Basil, do you have additional thoughts on that?
One thing I would add is this is where coyotes are actually helping us. I know they're kind of considered a nuisance, but they definitely help dampen the deer population.
Okay, great.
I'll also mention in Duke Forest, we have data going back almost 100 years of what the forests look like and what the diversity of wildflowers were in areas. And we've seen a real decline in the diversity of herbaceous plants on the forest floor. And a major reason for that is the really high deer populations, where previously, when the Triangle was not such a urban and suburban area, deer were hunted and so forth. It is a real concern, the impacts that deer, a native species, have on biodiversity. So it's a kind of balancing act. The deer are without their predators, the populations are too large, they're out of control, and they are impacting rare plant species, rare animal species, etc.
Thank you. So here's a question for Elena or Matt from Catherine, who asks, which pollinator-friendly species would do well in shade? Elena?
I might toss that one over to Matt as well. I think he's the expert here.
That is actually a good question, and one that I like. I'm a forester, so I tend to know a little bit more about trees, and there's some trees and shrubs that some I have in my yard and have planted, including some viburnums like black haw, which is like a small tree. Really pretty flower in the spring, good for pollinators. I also have some downy arrowwood, which is another viburnum. So I would tend to go for some of those species. Those are adapted to growing sort of in the understory of a more closed canopy, lower light levels. With a lot of the forbs and flowers, wildflowers, might find it hard in high shade. Alan might have more ideas there.
I saw a few going by in chat, a few suggestions like by Emily Oglesby. A gardening problem with gardening with natives, a sort of general problem, it seems like, is everyone wants these drifts of lots of flowering plants and so forth that you really get in primarily in sunny situations. And particularly difficult is where you have a combination of dense shade and also dry conditions. So those can be really challenging gardening situations. We do have a lot of recommendations at the North Carolina Botanical Garden about native plants that you can use in sort of a whole set of wide variety of different situations. So I would encourage you to contact the garden about advice about that.
Great, thank you. So here's a question from Jack Blackmore, who's also on the TNC board with me. And Jack is asking about the impact of Japanese stiltgrass. Any hope for reducing the impact of Japanese stiltgrass in natural areas in a sustainable fashion? So I think maybe Alan or Matt, you want to take that first?
Well, I'll just quickly say, and then I'll let Matt give you a real answer. Japanese stiltgrass is a real problem. It's not going to go away. It is the proverbial shutting the barn door after the horse is out. It was accidentally introduced back in the 1920s in Tennessee. It has spread all over Eastern North America. Very little eats it. It can really dominate areas, particularly on moist soils like in bottomlands. And because of its cryptic flowering and seeding and the fact that it establishes a seed bank, it takes really persistent work to knock it back. And then if you're in a floodplain situation, all you need is the next flood to bring in seeds from upstream. So it's a really daunting plant to try to deal with. And I hope Matt will give me the perfect answer that will give me hope.
I'll do my best. I think Alan summed it up well. It is really hard to get rid of. The seed stays viable for years. As Alan mentioned, it's in the seed bank, and so eradication takes repeated efforts over a number of years until that seed is exhausted. TLC has done some in highly sensitive areas. We will use volunteers to hand pull it, which is not a fun job. But doing that for several years in a row can remove it. If it's spread over larger areas and you want to eradicate it, it is susceptible to herbicide. We have found that a very low concentration of just Roundup, so 0.5%, is enough to kill Microstegium, and it will not kill much else. So if it is growing amongst and over other plants, native plants, that lower concentration will usually get rid of it, but not hurt the natives. So we've had some success with that, but it is everywhere. And if there's a stream and it floods, more seed is going to be deposited. For that reason, we typically start at the top of the bank as high as it goes and work our way down. And so with the thinking that, as the stream floods, there'll be more near the creek, but we can try to contain it a little bit that way. Good question. It's a tough thing to deal with.
And Scott in
Tough
chat
one.
has mentioned weed eating. The rule there is, once again, that you just have to keep at it. You have to just go at it regularly over a period of years to really knock it back.
Keep at it. Okay. Continue to work on it. Yes, Basil, please.
So it's a rhizomorphous plant, I believe, which means it has underground connected root system, sort of like bamboo. So one of the keys when you're dealing with these sorts of plants and you want to eradicate them is you have to cut the leaves down, right? So it can't photosynthesize, and it takes a while to deplete the root system of energy. But if you can starve out the root system to where you're knocking down those shoots every single time, eventually it starves the root system out, and then you can get your control.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, I have one for Elena now, I think, that I'm particularly excited about as well. So Elena, Sarah asks if you can talk more about the children's activities that you developed with Michaela to help them learn about pollinators.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are super lucky to have Michaela Wren as a volunteer at Williamson, specifically supporting in the pollinator garden. And we can actually send this material around to folks after the webinar, but she's developed a great set of resources. For kids, I think there are a lot of opportunities to learn sort of about broad scientific topics around pollination, and also I think like the topic of pollination offers some great opportunities for kids to get involved and sort of broader work to protect our planet. So we can send those resources along to folks, absolutely.
Excellent, that's great. It's so important to get kids engaged at an early age. So here's another question for you, Basil. Joyce asks, what are the best trees to plant here that are not from Asia?
Well, we have a lot of cool native species, and I would sort of define native as something that will support our local wildlife populations and caterpillars. They have co-evolved together. So, I mean, we have oaks and beeches. They're really amazing overstory trees, dogwoods, fringe tree, and witch hazel are beautiful smaller trees. We have a really cool native called the smoke tree. If you want something really flashy that looks even, to put the crepe myrtles to shame in your neighborhood. For shrubs, there's great stuff. Oak leaf hydrangea, Virginia sweet spire, awesome stuff. Doug Tallamy and his team put together a website you can go to. And I can't remember the name of the website, but if you search Doug Tallamy Native Plant Finder, you can just punch in your zip code. It'll show you cool plants for your area. And then also NC State has a really cool plant selection tool. And you can choose native shrub or native tree as your selection criteria.
Great. And while Basil, while you are on unmute, another question for you. What does Project Pando stand for? Where did that name come from?
The quaking aspens in Utah. It's a clonal tree species. They're all connected underground. It's one organism. It's a whole forest that's all just one organism. So it's the whole idea that we're all tied together. We share resources, unity, there's strength in unity.
Great name, excellent. There are so many great questions here, and I'm looking at the time. I am pretty sure we are not going to be able to get through all of these, but as I mentioned, Our panelists will be able to answer these and we'll send them out, send responses back out when we send the recording. So hang tight there, your questions will be answered for sure. So I'm just gonna do a quick run through of the questions and see which one we should take next. Yes, so here's a question for anybody actually, and this is from Dawn, who asks if there are any local plant share organizations for easily propagated pollinators like echinacea and asters that are out there that Dawn would love to give or receive from local folks instead of buying from a store. Maybe Basil, want to start?
We have a North Carolina Native Plant Society here. Dale Batcher and a few other folks help run that. And I know they're often saving plants and, from construction projects, it's kind of like plant sharing. I guess it's like plant collecting, but they also do plant share events.
Anyone else? Okay, so here's a question for, I think, Matt. Ruth asks if someone wanted to do a prescribed burn for their woods or for folks in the country that have a lot of land. Is that possible? And if so, what sort of business contractor would they need to connect with?
That's a great question. It is possible. TLC conducts prescribed burns on some of our properties. They have been temporarily suspended right now with the pandemic, just putting smoke in the air and a respiratory illness going around. But other groups are still burning. The Nature Conservancy, for example, is still burning, and they have enhanced guidelines around COVID. We have 4, I think, certified burners on staff. There is a class you can go to, the North Carolina Forest Service, and become a certified burner. And this allows you to be shielded for all smoke liability. If you burn with an accepted plan, accepted by the Forest Service within your plan guidelines, you're shielded from smoke liability if you are a certified burner. We also use a contractor who is very experienced and also comes with insurance, which I would highly recommend. And there are I believe the North Carolina Forest Service has lists of contractors on their website that you can look up and find one in the area. There are a number around the state.
Excellent. Thank you for responding to that question. So we are coming to the close of almost to the close of our session today. And I want to go ahead and thank you all for joining us, but also a huge round of applause and thank you to Basil, Alan, Matt, and Elena for spending the evening with us. And I know I learned a lot. I'm sure you all learned a lot as well. And we have a ton of questions that have not been answered. And I just want to assure you that TLC will respond to your questions when the recording is sent out as well. So I'm going to pass it back to Sandy to close us out today.
Great. Wow. Thank you all so much. There was so much activity in the chat and the Q&A. I just love that. And there will be a follow-up email sent out so that you have contact information for the speakers and a ton of resource guides. Lots of things that were mentioned in the chat are also in the resource guide. And I think any that got mentioned, I think Basil mentioned a couple that we'll make sure get in there. But anyway, thank you so much. And thank you, Anupama, for being the host tonight. Just so folks know, she was scheduled to be the host, the MC, back in March when we had to cancel our Wild Ideas program right as the pandemic hit. So I thought it was really nice of her to join us. I also want to thank the North Carolina Botanical Gardens. Really wish we could have been in your space. I think that would have been great, but we make do, and I think this was a great turnout. We had people from all over who might not have been able to attend in person, so thank you so much. And also thanks to our sponsors, Great Outdoor Provision Company, Blue Heron, Bank of America, Leaf and Limb, Murphy's Naturals, and Centrex. They all helped make this possible tonight. I just wanted to say a few things. I have been especially grateful for TLC staff and board during the pandemic. I've always really appreciated them, but especially now, they've been great. And so I love that y'all got to meet some of them. I want to put out a special thanks to TLC's advancement team who made all of this possible, especially Christine Wilson and Casey, who put so much time into organizing every little bit of this event. Pretty soon you'll get a follow-up email from TLC with links to the Wildflower Resource Guide, speaker contact information, and registration for 4 small distance wildflower walks this weekend hosted by TLC in the Botanical Garden. Those went out also in the chat, but you'll get them in an email. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for one of those. A copy of this presentation will be available on our website, and we welcome you to learn more about Triangle Land Conservancy, our nature preserves, more than 40 miles of hiking and mountain biking trail, and particularly our newly opened Bailey and Sarah Williamson Preserve in Wake County. You can visit us at triangleland.org, and you can check out the hiking challenge, Triangle Explorer, conservation conversations. You can sign up for our newsletter and also become a volunteer. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great evening.